So last week was an excellent week to be a liberal or a progressive because we had historic victories across the country. So as you all know, Lee Carter, a Democratic socialist, actually won his race. We had a transgender woman defeat a transphobic bigot who actually proposed anti-trans bathroom bills. That asshole was defeated by someone who he thinks is inferior to him. So just phenomenal results across the country. But there is one more special election that is still taking place in the state of Alabama. And this race is so crazy that it might actually be stranger than fiction. So this race features Doug Jones, who is a milquetoast, boring neoliberal Democrat, and a Republican named Roy Moore, who is batshit crazy. I mean, this is a fire and brimstone evangelical Republican, and he was the former Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. Now, even though he was elected twice, he was also removed twice. And Roy Moore is so insane that he doesn't just believe that marriage equality should be illegal, but he also believes that homosexuality should just be outlawed altogether. So he's literally against freedom.
I think it's a yes or no. Do you think that homosexuality or homosexual conduct should be illegal today? That's a yes or no question.
Homosexual conduct should be illegal. Yes.
Should be illegal.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to why Roy Moore is unfit to serve in any office in the country, let alone the Senate, we can go on and on and on all day because this guy is a lunatic. He's undoubtedly unfit to serve. But besides all of those negative aspects we already know about Roy Moore, we also learned recently that he's literally a pedophile. He is a serial sexual assaulter. So when Roy Moore was 32 years old, he was actually the assistant district attorney in Alabama. And one day, outside of a courtroom, there was a mother and a daughter waiting. So this was a custody battle, and this took place in an Etowah County courthouse. Now, since Roy Moore saw the mother and the daughter waiting, the daughter's name was Lee Corfman, he actually offered to watch her so she wouldn't have to hear everything that her parents were saying. Now, as Stephanie McCruman and Beth Reinhardt of the Washington Post reports, alone with Corfman, Moore chatted with her and asked for her phone number, she says. Days later, she says, he picked her up around the corner from her house in Gadsden, drove her about 30 miles to his home in the woods, told her how pretty she was, and kissed her. On a second visit, she says, he took off her shirt and pants and removed his clothes. He touched her over her bra and underpants, she says, and guided her hand to touch him over his underwear. I wanted it over with. I want it out, she remembers thinking. Please, just get it over with. Whatever this is, just get it over. Corfman says she asked Moore to take her home, and he did. Aside from Corfman, 3 other women interviewed by the Washington Post in recent weeks say Moore pursued them when they were between the ages of 16 and 18. He was in his early 30s, episodes they say they found flattering at the time, but troubling as they got older. Now, after these 4 women came forward and accused him of being a sexual predator, another woman came forward, and her name is Beverly Mason, and she explains how he sexually assaulted her when she was just 16 years old.
I parked his car in between the dumpster and the back of the restaurant where there were no lights. The area was dark and it was deserted. I was alarmed and I immediately asked him what he was doing. Instead of answering my questions, Mr. Moore reached over and began groping me and putting his hands on my breast. I tried to open my car door to leave, but he reached over and he locked it so I could not get out. I tried fighting him off while yelling at him to stop. But instead of stopping, he began squeezing my neck, attempting to force my head onto his crotch. I continued to struggle. I was determined that I was not going to allow him to force me to have sex with him. I was terrified. He was also trying to pull my shirt off. I thought that he was going to rape me. I was twisting, and I was struggling, and I was begging him to stop.
Now, listening to her explained that story was just downright disturbing. I can't even imagine how terrified she must have been. I mean, he's sick. He's a monster. Who would do that? Now, when confronted with these allegations, he claims that this couldn't have happened because he doesn't even know who Beverly Nelson is. Except the problem is that she actually showed us that she was actually in contact with Moore because he signed her yearbook at the time, and look at that. It seems to be the exact same signature he still uses. So in other words, he's obviously lying. Now keep in mind that the stories from these 5 girls, well, these are just the stories of girls that were close with him, that were in contact with him, but he actually literally sought out relationships with underage girls pretty frequently. He would show up at malls and prey on them so much that he actually got banned from a mall. So according to Justin Baragona of Mediaite, in a news story by The New Yorker, a number of local sources told reporter Charles Bethia that Moore was banned from that mall for constantly pestering teenaged girls. Bethia also spoke with 2 law enforcement officers about the rumored mall ban. One of the officers, both asked to remain unnamed, noted that the general knowledge at the time when I moved here was that this guy is a lawyer cruising the mall for high school dates. It was also stated that Moore had been run off from several stores because he wouldn't leave girls alone. So this guy is a pedophile. He was seeking out relationships with underage girls at malls. I mean, the ages of these girls. Now, one of the girls here, the first 4 that came out, she was 14 when he initially contacted her and then took her on a date when she was 16. So, I mean, he was waiting. He knew he wanted to be in a relationship with her and pursue her. So this guy is a pedophile. He's a creep. Now, to show you just how bad of a person Roy Moore is, as spineless and corrupt as the Republican Party is, well, Roy Moore is even too crazy for them, because House Speaker Paul Ryan actually called on him to end his campaign, saying that these allegations are credible. Also, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he believes the women and doesn't believe that Roy Moore is even fit to serve in the U.S. Senate, and if he wins, Mitch McConnell is not ruling out expulsion. In fact, Mitch McConnell even met with Trump to figure out how to deal with this lunatic who might actually win, who's arguably more insane than Donald Trump by several measures. Now, additionally, a substantial portion of the Republican Party has essentially come out against him, but that doesn't mean that all Republicans are coming out against Roy Moore, because obviously, you know, if they have one less Republican in the Senate, that doesn't necessarily bode too well for their legislative agenda. Now, again, you've got to be a gigantic piece of shit if the corrupt Republican Party is willing to jeopardize their ability to deliver huge tax breaks to their largest donors, because with Roy Moore, obviously he would be a vote in their favor. But they think that he's so loathsome that they're not even willing to allow him to win. They're actually talking about expulsion. But that's not all, because some prominent pastors in Alabama have actually turned on him as well, primarily because he claimed to have their endorsements when that wasn't actually the case. And this was actually because he re-released former endorsements years ago prior to the sexual assault allegations resurfacing. So obviously, they don't approve of that. Now, finally, this is actually starting to hurt him politically, because his Democratic opponent, Doug Jones, is now actually 4 points ahead of him in at least one poll, according to JMC Analytics and Polling. But his reputation isn't necessarily damaged among all demographics, because according to that same poll, it actually found that evangelical voters, which just so happen to be his core base and also the group of people that should theoretically be against sexual deviancy the most, well, they actually seem to like him more now after learning that he's a pedophile, because that same JMC poll found that 37% of evangelicals said the sexual assault allegations against Roy Moore made them more likely to vote for Roy Moore, whereas 34% said the allegations made no difference, and only 28% said sexual assault allegations made them less likely to vote for him. So, I'm going to say that again. 37% of evangelicals said that after hearing about these sexual assault allegations, they're now more likely to vote for Roy Moore. So after hearing the story that we all just heard from Korfman and Beverly Nelson, they thought, oh, now that I'm hearing this, I like him even more. what is wrong with people? To be ambivalent about these sexual assault allegations is one thing, but to actually have this increase your perception of Roy Moore in a positive direction, that's lunacy. Something is wrong here. These people are insane. Now, if you're wondering how it's the case that people don't really seem to care that much about these allegations, we do have a case study. So there is one Alabama journalist named Brandon Mosley, and he still supports Roy Moore even after finding out that he's literally a pedophile. Watch this interview and try not to go crazy, because it is madness.
If Roy Moore committed a sin, that's a sin and that's not good. But we're not talking about an actual crime here that's prosecutable in 2017. I don't think you throw out 35 years of a man's career and his reputation because of unsubstantiated allegation from 1979.
Brandon,
that can't be proven either way.
She was 14 years of age, and I don't know how much digging you did or didn't do into the law in 1979, but we did, and we found Section 13A 667. We found that this was on the books going back to 77 and would have been considered sexual abuse in the second degree. Care to respond?
Which is a misdemeanor in Alabama.
Does that make it okay?
If I'm correct. No. But again, if Roy Moore has stolen a lawnmower when he was 21, that's bad, but that's not a reason 50 years later to all of a sudden, throw him off the ballot or let Mitch McConnell pick the next senator of Alabama.
Sexual abuse, stealing a lawnmower, let's not even go there.
Oh, but he did just go there. He literally compared sexual assaulting multiple underage girls to stealing a lawnmower. That is the level of delusion that is fueling Roy Moore's support base. But of course, that's just one reporter. He has to be an outlier, right? Of course, somebody from the Alabama Republican Party, they're going to come out and denounce him, right? Well, actually, here's what the former chair had to say about Roy Moore.
I know you're skeptical of these charges from these four women. Why?
Yeah.
Why are you skeptical?
Well, first of all, I want to state something very important. I'm a father of a daughter. I take these things very, very seriously, as does the people of Alabama and, frankly, the rest of the United States. But don't you, you're the journalist. Mm-hmm. Don't you find it just mildly curious that this would be coming out within a month of a big election where the Senate is on the line, where tax reform is on the line, where Obamacare is on the line? It's kind of timely, don't you think?
Well, the election is coming up, but I would also observe that in the last month or two, we have seen a lot of famous men, left, right, and center, have their past actions dating back decades come under scrutiny, whether Harvey Weinstein or Bill O'Reilly, Louis C.K. And when the women are interviewed, they often say that they were inspired by other women coming forward. Also, just having now covered a few of these stories, I know that it takes a while in many cases for women who have horrible incidents like this, allegedly, in their past to get the courage to come forward.
No, that makes sense, and I understand that, but I would counter what you're saying with this simple fact. Roy Moore has run multiple times in the state of Alabama, governor, state Supreme Court chief, U.S. Senate, just finished a very aggressive U.S. Senate race. Millions of dollars of opposition research against Judge Moore. Where was it ever found? Why is it showing up now?
Jake Tapper just told you. This is insane. So that was actually the former chair of the Alabama Republican Party, Marty Connors. And in spite of the mountain of evidence proving that Roy Moore is a pedophile, he still chooses to deny reality. Even though that is still surprising, this really is a go-to Republican tactic, because this is what they do, for example, when you see protesters who are protesting the Republican Party's desire to defund Planned Parenthood. they'll automatically say, oh, well, these are just paid protesters and people don't really care. And the same thing really is being said about Roy Moore's accusers here. In fact, his wife literally stated that she is currently gathering evidence to show that these women are actually just being paid to say these things about Roy Moore. So if you don't believe his accusers in spite of all the evidence, I don't know what to say. So obviously Roy Moore, this goes without saying, he absolutely cannot win because Congress is already filled with corrupt criminals and warmongers. We don't need to add a pedophile to the list of criminals that already exist in Washington, D.C. I think that we have to have some standard in U.S. politics. We already allowed a reality TV show star to become the president. Can we at least draw the line at pedophiles? Can we at least do that? Is there any sanity left in this country to where we can say, I don't approve of a pedophile? Do we have standards anymore? He is an objectively bad human being by any sane thinking person's standards. So if he wins, then my faith in humanity it's not going to be good, right? Because to vote for someone, look, here's the thing. If you put Bernie Sanders up against Donald Trump and told me that Bernie Sanders was a pedophile, I wouldn't vote for him. Even though I care more about policy than anything else, we still have to have standards. If somebody is that despicable of a human being to where they would sexually assault children, then needless to say, we shouldn't trust them politically. So even if you may agree with Roy Moore on the policy substance, you have to draw the line. We have to have standards, people. This is not acceptable. He's a pedophile. He has to lose.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.